Face it, you're either perfect or you're not him. Hey guys, this is not really a review. This is going to be more like my cliff jumper videos from months ago, the RonBonDujon Rambles like a moron over the 2007 movie Cliff Jumper. Well, I'm going to be rambling like a moron over this Irwin Toys Perfect Cell. That's Irwin, like a Steve Irwin, I guess. Irwin. This was a Perfect Cell that came out in 2000, I'm pretty sure, and he came out with a little Cell Jr. there. And this was a childhood toy that I absolutely adored. Dragon Ball was my introduction to anime, even though at the time I didn't know what anime was. I just knew that Dragon Ball was pretty cool. And I've always had a massive soft spot for Dragon Ball. I don't feel like it ever comes up on the channel. I know I did reviews kind of before I started to get a big audience, a lot of YouTube shorts that I'm still pretty happy with. But it's always been a part of my life. I've always liked the characters from Dragon Ball. I actually, in my own writing, kind of reflect on the character writing of Dragon Ball because I think the characters were always so great and fully realized. Even as an adult, even though sometimes I think the story of Dragon Ball wasn't exactly my cup of tea, I think the characters and the designs were always just so brilliant. So brilliant. And there's a reason why I wanted to make this video today. This isn't a review of this really cool Perfect Cell. This Perfect Cell was my childhood Perfect Cell. It was the only Dragon Ball toy I had as a kid because Perfect Cell was my favorite villain. He was my favorite character from Dragon Ball. And in all honesty, he probably still is. There's a few characters I really like in Dragon Ball nowadays. Like, I like Zamasu, I like Bardock, Vegeta, Piccolo. You gotta always like them, but Cell is probably my absolute top favorite still. And the reason why I'm making this video is because it is March 1st. 1 year ago today, Akira Toriyama passed away. Akira Toriyama is the man who did Dragon Ball. He made Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. He made Dragon Ball Super. If it wasn't for him, this massive gateway anime, this keystone franchise that brought so many people, especially in the West, into appreciation of this brilliant art form, he's gone. There's not really a good comparison I can think of aside from, if you want to be very pretentious, which I often am, it's similar to when we lost Stan Lee. Because Stan Lee, say what you will about him in his personal life, the reality is he was a gateway creator for people to get into comic books. And he was an advocate for comic books. He was someone who people generally respected in the mainstream. And I feel like when it comes to anime, especially in the West, especially in the United States, especially in the United States, I think Akira Toriyama filled a very similar role in that people knew that name, or at the very least knew Dragon Ball. And for a lot of people, Dragon Ball is anime. Kind of like how Nintendo was video games. A lot of people assume that all anime was like Dragon Ball. And I know that has made a lot of diehard anime fans in the United States kind of view Dragon Ball with a little bit of contempt, because it does suck when such a varied art form is painted with such broad strokes. But let's not get away from the fact that Dragon Ball is the reason why Funimation can bring over these more obscure anime and give them good dubs and good subs. Dragon Ball is the reason why anime became celebrated. Dragon Ball is the reason why in the early 2000s, basically every Western cartoon attempted to take things from anime, storytelling, character arcs, animation styles. Just to go over some of the cartoons of my childhood, Transformers Animated, very inspired by anime. Teen Titans, very inspired by anime. Amazing Spider-Man, very inspired by anime. Codename Kids Next Door. A who's who of action cartoons. Samurai Jack, good God. And those things exist because of the impact that anime had not just on audiences, but on creators. And without Dragon Ball's success kind of paving a way for other anime, I question, would Hayao Miyazaki have won his Oscar? Would Studio Ghibli have been able to or rather Studio Ghibli, be able to come over and have the inroads that they were able to build up eventually without there being some old man in a suit somewhere saying, I know anime, my kid likes that Dragon Ball. I'm not saying that Dragon Ball is the single best thing ever, but you have to give respect to something that helped pave the way for these things to become more accepted and more understood and more popular in the States. You know, in the same way that I don't like Naruto, but I'm not going to knock Naruto because Naruto is very much like a Dragon Ball in that it made anime more accessible. Same thing with the Pokemon anime. Same thing with My Hero Academia when it was really, really big during the pandemic. I think that you have to keep all these things in mind, especially if you are in love with an art form. And I do love anime. My favorite director of all time, the greatest director to ever live, is Hayao Miyazaki. No one comes close. I don't care who you show me. You can bring up a Martin Scorsese. You can bring up a Orson Welles. Doesn't matter. The greatest director of all time is Hayao Miyazaki. No one understands emotion better. No one understands how to make a universal story better than Hayao Miyazaki. He's the greatest director of all time. And I would not know him, and many Americans would not know him, if it weren't for the inroads Dragon Ball made about a decade before his movies like Howl's Moving Castle and Spirited Away were able to come to the United States. I have to thank Dragon Ball for giving me movies that helped shape me. I have to thank Dragon Ball for giving me inspiration as a writer. I have to thank Dragon Ball for the love and enjoyment I had for it as a kid, and I have to thank Dragon Ball for the love I have for it now as an adult. Because yeah, this is my childhood perfect cell. And I want to make this clear. I didn't realize I still had this guy. I opened up a box from the old house a few days ago, and he was there. I thought this was one of the many toys I lost in one of the big, problems of my childhood, but to see him, and he still has his Cell Jr., and he's in great condition, this was incredible to me. I still had my childhood perfect Cell. When I don't have so many of my childhood toys, I still have him. And it gets a little bit better, I think. Just to be clear, I still love Dragon Ball today. I still collect Dragon Ball today. I don't have any figure arts, and I have some figurized model kits. I just haven't built them yet, but this has been my perfect Cell stand-in for years now. It's the Dragon Stars Cell, and I love him. I think he was great, but what I always wanted was my original guy back, but I never got a replacement copy because it wouldn't have been as special. But again, these two together, my favorite Dragon Ball character, and it's enough to overwhelm. It is. It is. It's enough to make me very, very careful with what I say right now, because I'm worried that I'm going to start crying on camera, and I'm not. I love you guys, but I don't cry in front of family. I can't cry on camera. But there's something about seeing these things together, and it's just, here it is, man. Just like my 2007 movie Cliffjumper. I'm looking at him right now. He's staring at me from across the room. Like seeing another toy that was so important to me. Because, we talked about my childhood Transformers. I didn't really talk about, the toys that got to hang out with the Transformers. My childhood Ahsoka and Captain Rex, who would always be with my Autobots. My Perfect Cell, who for a long time was not a leader of the Decepticons, but like a mercenary they brought in who was always kind of doing his own agenda. Like, having this Perfect Cell again, it's just like completing the childhood collection again, because it was. If I could get my old Jumbo Superman, the one that they did for the Justice League cartoon that was like 10 inches tall, and I could get that original Captain Rex and Ahsoka again, that would be my childhood toy lineup. That'd be all of them back together again. And of course the Hamtaros. But the Hamtaros weren't, they weren't on either side. That was Sweden, man. They were neutral. But, yeah. This wasn't a review. This was not a review. This is me talking about a a series that means a lot to me, and a creator who meant a lot to me. Because again, I could play armchair writer all day. You know, I could have hindsight's 2020 and say, oh, well, you could have done this, you could have done that. The reality is, Akira Toriyama made some incredible characters, some very engaging characters. Dragon Ball Super was never my cup of tea. A lot of the story just didn't really work for me. But I watched it because of the characters. Because I loved the characters and I loved their interactions. And I think there are writers out there who are brilliant at story, not too great at characters. I think there's people out there who are great at characters, not so great at story. You know, I think a lot of the great comedy writers are great at character, not great at story. I think a lot of the, like a Harold Ramis. You know, he did Ghostbusters, he did Caddyshack. Great writer for characters and banter. Not story was not the priority. And if you want to look at the alternative, again, in film and writing, you know, you can look at a Christopher Nolan. Great story. Characters are kind of thin. And then you got Akira Toriyama, who I think was more on the character side of things, but he made good stories too. Even though his writing style was so much by the seat of his pants, he had good arcs. He had good themes. The Gohan versus Cell story is still just brilliant in that it's ultimately a story of Cell, who is the culmination of every single person Gohan ever looked up to. He's fighting the embodiment of all these expectations and this horrible mentality that's been forced onto him since his literal adolescence, since he was a toddler. And he's fighting against it all at once. He's fighting against Raditz kidnapping him. He's fighting against Vegeta beating him. He's fighting against Frieza killing Krillin. He's fighting against King Cold and his empire. And he's fighting against, perhaps most importantly, Goku. He's fighting against his dad. A fighter who only cares about fighting the strongest and being stronger than everyone else and doesn't care about the world around him. Gohan is fighting the worst aspects of every single person he fears and every single person he respects all in one go. And the reason he's able to win is because, one, he was able to learn from people like Piccolo, who the other characters didn't pay attention to, but also because Gohan is not his father. Gohan is not the culmination of his father's lifetime. Gohan is his own man, and as his own man, was able to overcome the legacy of the generation that came before him. I know that's unbelievably pretentious. I'm sorry. I'm a very pretentious person. I say that a lot. I'm the kid in class who asked, well, why are the curtains blue? But you know, as a kid who didn't have a great relationship with his dad, and a kid who really struggled to figure out what they were now that they weren't a son anymore, I really liked the story of Gohan and Cell. And as a kid, I don't think I understood why I liked it so much, but as an adult, I can figure out why it meant a lot to me back then. So I thank Akira Toriyama. I thank him for that story, and I thank him for making a big, sexy bug man. And I thank him for the contributions he made to the world of art at large. It's a shame that he is no longer with us. Whenever we lose a creator like that, it's devastating. I didn't make a video at the time because I was worried that people would see it as me just trying to cash in. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to make a video talking about a man's death, especially a man who did a lot to help me through his writing. But on the year of his passing, I have to do something. So this is me rambling about the Irwin Toys Perfect Cell. We'll do a review of him very soon. But today, Today it's more just about the vibes. But thank you guys for watching this. I hope it wasn't too bloated or pretentious or boring. It's just a lot of stuff I had to talk about, you know. But thank you for watching, and we'll see what we get up to next time.